extraordinary earthquake pattern that is raising questions among scientists worldwide. Something is shifting, guys, beneath the southern tip of South America, and it's not for the first time. So we need to look into this because there was just a significant earthquake, a massive magnitude 7.5 earthquake on May 2nd, and we still have aftershocks going on. So imagine waking up to the ground shaking so violently that even buildings hundreds of miles away from the epicenter are rattling. So that was happening early morning of May 2nd, 2025. The earth struck hard, unleashing this massive 7.5 magnitude earthquakes in one of the most remote and here it comes, guys, geologically dangerous corners of the world. And now my buddy Eddie needs to listen as well. It's called the Drake Passage. It's just south of Ushuaia in Argentina. But this wasn't just one big earthquake. What was following was a swarm of multiple aftershocks, strong aftershocks, with at least 5 aftershocks in the magnitude 6 range. And that's why I said at the beginning, that is an extraordinary pattern that is raising questions among the scientists. So what has caused this seismic event? Why now? And what does the tectonic setup in this volatile and dangerous region tell us about what could happen next? Because that is important. So let's begin by placing the whole thing on the map. So this earthquake struck roughly 222 kilometers south of Ushuaia near the narrow Drake Passage. So this is a stretch of turbulent sea that is basically separating South America from Antarctica. And most people know this area for its brutal waves and legendary storms, but beneath these icy waters lies a hidden battlefield, guys, and you have to know about this. It's called the Scotia Plate. And it's caught between the massive South American plate to the north and the Atlantic plate to the south. And to make it clear what we're looking at here, we're looking at one of Earth's least understood tectonic plates. That's why it's so important to analyze this chain of event that just happened. So in this area, this is a complex system of transform faults, particularly the Scotia and Arctic boundary. So instead of crashing into each other like the Andes or pulling apart like the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, the plates here are grinding past one another in a similar motion to California's San Andreas Fault. So you might wonder, okay, so what's so special about this, right? We have this at the San Andreas Fault. But what's going on here is on a way more fragmented and isolated scale. And the tension has been building there. Yes, historically, if we look at the past, this region is no stranger to powerful earthquakes. In 2013, for example, a magnitude 7.0 shook the same fault zone. Then in 2018, another 7.1 hit a little bit further west. But this quake that just happened on May 2nd at 7.5 magnitude is one of the strongest that has been recorded in the Drake Passage in decades. And the sheer number of aftershocks, with many above the magnitude 6, suggests that the crust is still adjusting violently, really violently. So what exactly is happening beneath the surface that this is being triggered? Well, let's look at the South Scotia Ridge. It's essentially a strike-slip boundary. Unlike a typical subduction zone where one plate dives underneath the other plate, strike-slip faults, they slide horizontally. But in this region, it's way more complicated than that, because the Scotia Plate is being squeezed from multiple directions. To the north, the South American plate is pushing it southward. To the west, the Nazca Plate is moving east. And to the south, the Antarctic Plate is pushing north. The Scotia Plate is basically the unlucky fragment that's caught right in the middle. And then it's being torn apart by this. So the 7.5 magnitude that occurred on May 2nd likely occurred on the East Scotia Ridge or its nearby transform segments, with lateral movement suddenly snapping after years, possibly decades of accumulating stress. And now let's talk about these aftershocks. So over like 35 to 40 quakes have followed the main shock so far, and at least 5 of them, have exceeded magnitude 6, which is highly, highly unusual, guys. One has measured 6.4, another one 6.3, and several more in the 6.0 to 6.2 range. And these are not your typical aftershocks. This is what I want to make clear. So they're large enough on their own to cause local tsunamis and landslides if they had struck closer to populated coastlines. And this shaking didn't just rattle seismographs. It triggered immediate concern across southern Chile and Argentina. So within minutes of the main shock of the 7.5 magnitude shock, tsunami alerts were issued by both the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center and the local Chilean authorities. And the Chilean National Emergency Office, it's known as ONEMI, has issued a preventative tsunami warning for the Magallanes region, and that includes Puerto Natales, Punta Arenas, and the Chilean Antarctic coast. And sirens went off in multiple locations, and authorities ordered immediately evacuations of low-lying coastal zones. And also, emergency messages went out to residents via text message, radio, and urging them to seek higher ground, even in frigid and Arctic wind conditions. Also, President Gabriel Boric of Chile has made a public statement urging residents to remain calm, but to follow all evacuation orders without hesitation immediately. And Chile's Navy closely monitored sea level changes, and although no major tsunami waves have materialized, thankfully, authorities kept the warning in place until they could confirm that the risk had passed. And believe me, guys, these precautions were not taken lightly, because this part of the world remembers too well the devastating tsunamis that have followed megathrust earthquakes like the magnitude 9.5 Valdivia earthquake that happened in 1960 that has sent tsunami waves across the entire Pacific. So while thankfully, guys, no destructive tsunami occurred this time, the level of response that happened shows how seriously this seismic zone is treated and how prepared local governments are to act fast in the face of uncertainty. But let's zoom out of that area for a second. Could this be part of a larger tectonic chain reaction? That's the big question, because then we could see larger earthquakes somewhere else, maybe in more populated areas. And I've made a video about this. The Pacific Ring of Fire sees a lot of earthquakes and volcanic activity recently. It's definitely increased. So it's worth noting that earthquake swarms have been active across the Pacific in recent months, significant ones, from Japan to Papua New Guinea to the South Sandwich Islands, and in some areas, in some cases, large tectonic shifts in one part of the world can affect distant fault systems due to stress transfer. And that can lead to global plate readjustment. That sounds a little bit scary. Take a deep breath. While there's no immediate evidence right now that this magnitude 7.5 quake is directly linked to other recent activity, scientists say they have to monitor this very, very closely, and they have to monitor very closely nearby subduction zones, especially an area that is called the Peru-Chile Trench. This is known as a seismic hotspot. So could this monster be affected by that or even triggered? So what's next? Aftershocks will definitely continue for days, maybe even weeks, possibly weeks. Some may exceed magnitude 6 again. That's what scientists are expecting. And a larger quake in the same fault segment is thankfully unlikely, but not impossible. So the real concern right now is whether this shift triggers adjustment elsewhere, especially along the Scotia Plate boundaries, including the nearer to South America's northern cities, such as Punta Arenas, Puerto Natales, or Ushuaia. And there's a fascinating twist. The Antarctic plate, they once thought that this is one of the most stable on Earth, is increasingly showing signs of tectonic stress and seismic activity. Boom! And what is causing this? Well, ice is disappearing, melting glaciers and shifting loads through that on the crust could be contributing factors, essentially taking weight off the lithosphere and allowing deeper faults to reactivate. How can we sum that up? The Earth is very much alive there. It's not quiet, and the Earth has just reminded us about that. So let's put this in perspective, what has happened. The magnitude 7.5 earthquake, or earthquakes greater than that, release more energy than 1,000 Hiroshima atomic bombs. That's what we're dealing with. And the ground usually shakes for minutes, not seconds. And in strike-slip zones like the one we're dealing with there, the movement can be deceptively fast, basically shifting entire sections of crust several meters in just a moment. Several meters. So the internal forces are always in motion, worldwide, building up pressure, cracking faults, and releasing energy. And the question in this area also is not if it's going to happen again. The question is, it is going to happen again, but where? And guys, really, we have to be aware of this. If you live in a seismically active area like I do, but especially along strike-slip faults or coastal regions near plate boundaries, this is your cue to review your emergency plans and check your preparedness. Because quakes like this just don't belong to remote areas, to remote ocean trenches. They can strike very close to home. So guys, as always, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please leave it a like, share it with your friends, become a subscriber. And if you want to support the channel, check the links in the description. I have a Buy Me a Coffee site, or with the supers, or become a supporting member. Click the join button, then you get behind the scenes videos and private stuff from me. And let me know in the comments, do you think we're entering a more active tectonic phase globally? So stay safe, guys, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.